The rain hammered against the windows like angry fists. Thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the giant mansion from top to bottom. Mr. Hayes stood in his front doorway, dripping wet, his expensive suit clinging to his tired body. He was home. Finally. The meeting had lasted forever. Hours and hours of talking about money, about factories, about numbers that made his head spin. But now, all he wanted was to kiss his children goodnight and fall into bed. But something felt wrong. The house was too quiet, too still. Mr. Hayes stepped inside and closed the heavy door behind him. The click echoed through the empty hallway like a gunshot. The chandeliers above swayed slightly, their crystals tinkling like tiny bells. The lights flickered once, twice, then held steady. "Hello," he called out. His voice bounced off the marble walls and came back to him, hollow and strange. No answer. Where was everyone? Where was Elena, the nanny? Where were his twins, Lucy and Max? Tick, tock, tick, tock. The grandfather clock in the corner counted the seconds. Each tick felt like a heartbeat. Each tock felt like a warning. Mr. Hayes loosened his tie and walked toward the grand staircase. His shoes clicked on the marble floor. The sound made him feel small, even though he was the richest man in the city. Even though he owned this enormous house with its 40 rooms and golden doorknobs and paintings worth more than cars. Tonight it all felt empty, cold, like a cage made of marble and money. He climbed the stairs slowly. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. That's when he heard it. A sound, faint, coming from somewhere above. Was it crying or whimpering, like a puppy hurt and scared? Mr. Hayes froze. His heart began to pound. "Lucy? Max?" he called, louder this time. No answer. Just that sound again. Soft, frightened, coming from the 3rd floor. He took the steps faster now, his breath coming quick. The hallway stretched before him, long and dark. The portraits on the walls seemed to watch him with cold, judging eyes. His grandfather, his father, all the Hayes men who had built this fortune, this empire, all the Hayes men who had kept secrets. The sound was coming from Elena's room, the nanny's room at the end of the hall. Why would the twins be in there? They should be in their own rooms, tucked in bed, dreaming sweet dreams. Mr. Hayes reached the door. His hand trembled as he gripped the cold brass handle. The door swung open, and his world stopped. Lucy and Max sat on the floor in the corner of the room. Their hands were tied behind their backs with thick rope. Their mouths were covered with tape. Their eyes were wide, filled with terror and tears streaming down their red cheeks. "No." Mr. Hayes screamed. He rushed forward, but a voice stopped him cold. "Don't move." Elena sat in a chair by the window, calm as a summer lake. The storm outside painted shadows across her face. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers laced together like she was praying. But her eyes, oh! Her eyes were not praying eyes. They were cold, hard, burning with something dark and terrible. "Elena, what have you done?" Mr. Hayes whispered. His voice cracked. "What is this?" The nanny didn't move. She just stared at him with those ice-cold eyes. "Sit down, Mr. Hayes," she said quietly. Her voice was soft but sharp, like a knife wrapped in silk. "My children." He started toward the twins again. I said, "Sit down." This time her voice was steel. She pointed to a chair across from her. Mr. Hayes looked at Lucy and Max. They were shaking, crying behind the tape, their little bodies trembling with fear. But they weren't hurt. Not yet. Slowly, carefully, he sat down. "Good," Elena said. She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile of someone who had waited a long, long time for this moment. The clock on the wall ticked louder. Tick, tock, tick, tock. "Why?" Mr. Hayes asked. His hands gripped his knees. "Why would you do this? I trusted you. I brought you into my home. I paid you well. You've been with us for 2 years. 2 years, Elena repeated, nodding slowly. 2 years of watching you sleep peacefully. 2 years of watching your children laugh and play. 2 years of pretending I didn't know the truth. What truth? What are you talking about? Elena stood up. She walked to a window and looked out at the storm. Lightning flashed, turning her face white for just a second. "Do you remember a fire, Mr. Hayes?" she asked softly. 5 years ago, at one of your factories, the one on Industrial Road." Mr. Hayes felt his stomach drop like a stone falling into a dark well. The factory, the fire. 17 people died that day. Elena continued. Her voice was shaking now, not with fear, but with rage barely held back. 17 people burned alive because the exits were locked, because you wanted to save money, because you didn't want workers leaving early. That was investigated. Mr. Hayes said quickly. His mouth was dry. "I was cleared. It was ruled an accident." Elena turned to face him. Tears glittered in her angry eyes. "One of those 17 people was my brother," she whispered. "His name was Daniel. He was 23 years old. He played guitar. He wanted to be a teacher. He worked at your factory to pay for college." The room seemed to shrink. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. "He died screaming your name," Elena said. "Screaming for help that never came. Screaming while you sat in your office, safe and rich and untouchable." Mr. Hayes couldn't speak. His throat was closed. His chest was tight. Lucy whimpered behind the tape. The sound broke his heart into pieces. "So now," Elena said, walking toward him slowly, "now you understand. Now you feel what I felt. Now you know what it's like to see someone you love in danger and know you can't save them." She stopped right in front of him. "Now, Mr. Hayes, we're going to talk about truth and justice and what you're willing to do to save your children." The storm outside howled. The lights flickered again. And Mr. Hayes realized that the real monster wasn't the thunder or the darkness outside. It was the choices he'd made, the secrets he'd kept, the people he'd hurt. And now, those ghosts had come home. Mr. Hayes sat frozen in the chair. His mind raced like a car spinning its wheels in mud, going nowhere fast. Daniel, the name echoed in his head. He tried to remember, tried to see a face, but there were so many workers. Hundreds, thousands over the years. They were just numbers in reports, names on paychecks. But to Elena, Daniel was everything. "I don't expect you to remember him," Elena said, reading his thoughts. She walked back to her chair and sat down, her back straight as a board. "You never knew any of their names. You never cared." "That's not fair," Mr. Hayes said weakly. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were lies. "Fair?" Elena's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You want to talk about fair? Let me tell you about fair, Mr. Hayes." She pulled a small photograph from her pocket. It was wrinkled and worn, like she'd held it 1,000 times. She held it up so he could see. A young man smiled in the picture. He had kind eyes and messy hair. His arm was around Elena's shoulders. They both looked happy. So happy it hurt to look at. "That was taken 3 weeks before the fire," Elena said softly, "at his birthday party. He told me he'd have his degree in 2 years. He promised to take me to see the ocean when he graduated. I'd never seen the ocean." She put the photo back in her pocket, right over her heart. "The day of the fire, I was at work too, at the restaurant downtown. I got a call at 3 in the afternoon. They told me there was an accident. They told me to come to the hospital." Lucy and Max had stopped struggling. They sat very still, listening. Even children know when something important is happening, when the air itself is holding its breath. "I ran 12 blocks, Elena continued. Her voice was flat now, like she was reading from a book, like these words had been repeated so many times they'd lost their shape. "I ran until my legs burned and my lungs screamed. But I was too late. Daniel was already gone." Mr. Hayes felt tears on his own cheeks. He didn't know when he'd started crying. "The news said it was an accident," Elena said. "The investigation said the fire started from old electrical wiring. They said it was nobody's fault." "It wasn't," Mr. Hayes started, but Elena cut him off. "But I talked to the survivors." Her voice rose like thunder. "I talked to Maria, who worked next to Daniel. She told me the exits were locked from the outside. She told me the fire alarms had been broken for months, but nobody fixed them because it cost too much money. She told me people banged on the doors screaming, but nobody could get out. Elena stood up again, pacing like a caged tiger. I went to the police. I showed them Maria's testimony. I showed them the safety reports that were ignored. I begged them to investigate you. And Mr. Hayes whispered, and they did nothing. Elena shouted, because you're rich. Because you have lawyers who cost more than my brother's whole life was worth. Because in this world, money talks louder than justice. She stopped pacing and pointed at him, her fingers shaking. The case was closed. You paid a fine. A tiny, meaningless fine that you probably spent more on your car that week. And Daniel got a funeral and a stone in the ground and nothing else. No justice. No punishment. Nothing. The room was silent except for the rain and the ticking clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Mr. Hayes looked at his children. Lucy's face was wet with tears. Max was trying to be brave, but his chin was trembling. So I made a plan. Elena said quietly, sitting back down. I changed my name. I got fake references. I applied to be your nanny. And you never even checked properly, did you? You never wondered why someone with my qualifications would work for so little money. You just saw someone who could watch your kids while you counted your gold. Shame burned in Mr. Hayes's chest like acid. She was right. He'd barely looked at her resume. He'd been too busy, too important, too focused on the next deal, the next meeting. I've been waiting, Elena said, waiting for the right moment, waiting to make you feel what I felt, to take something precious from you, the way you took Daniel from me. Please, Mr. Hayes said. His voice broke. Please, Elena, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about your brother. But my children, they're innocent. They didn't do anything wrong. Neither did Daniel. Elena skränged. The words echoed off the walls, bouncing back louder and angrier. He was innocent too. He was just trying to live his life, to make his dreams come true. But you took that away. Mr. Hayes buried his face in his hands. The weight of it all was crushing him, pressing down on his shoulders like a mountain. All those years, all those choices, cutting corners to save money, ignoring safety reports because fixing things was expensive, telling himself it was just business, just numbers, just the way things worked. But they weren't numbers. They were people. They were brothers and sisters and sons and daughters. They were Daniel's. You're right, he whispered through his tears. You're right about everything. I did ignore the reports. I did lock those doors. I did care more about money than people. He looked up at Elena, really looked at her, saw the pain carved into her face like words on stone. I killed your brother, he said. Maybe I didn't light the match, but I killed him as sure as if I had. And I've been hiding from that truth for 5 years. Elena stared at him. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. She hadn't expected him to admit it. I can't undo what I did, Mr. Hayes continued. His words came faster now, desperate and raw. I can't bring Daniel back. I would if I could. I swear I would. But I can't. He gestured to Lucy and Max. But they can still have a future. They can still see the ocean. They can still have birthdays and dreams and all the things Daniel should have had. Elena's jaw was tight. Her hands were clenched into fists. Why should they get what Daniel didn't? She asked. But her voice was softer now. The steel was bending. They shouldn't, Mr. Hayes said honestly. It's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. But taking them won't bring Daniel back. Hurting them won't heal your pain. It will just make more pain, more suffering, more people crying over people they love. He slid off the chair and fell to his knees on the hard floor. I'm begging you, Elena, not as a rich man, not as their father, but as one person to another. Please, let them go. Punish me. Tell the world what I did. Send me to prison. Take everything I own. But please let my children go. The clock ticked. The rain fell. The wind howled. Elena looked at the twins. Really looked at them. Saw how small they were. How scared. How much they looked like Daniel had when he was young. Innocent and fragile and full of unlived life. Her hands slowly unclenched. "If I let them go," she said quietly, "will you tell the truth? Will you confess what you did? Will you face the consequences?" "Yes," Mr. Hayes said immediately. "Yes, I'll tell everyone. I'll make it right, whatever it takes." Elena closed her eyes. A long, shaking breath escaped her lips. When she opened them again, something had changed. The ice had melted just a little. Behind the anger, behind the hunger for revenge, there was something else. Exhaustion, sadness, the tired soul of someone who'd carried a heavy burden for too long. "Okay," she whispered. Elena stood up slowly. Her legs were shaky, like she'd been running for miles. She walked toward Lucy and Max, and Mr. Hayes's heart jumped into his throat. "Wait," he started. But Elena knelt down beside the twins. Her hands, which had tied the ropes so tightly, now worked to loosen them. Her fingers trembled as she pulled at the knots. "I'm sorry," she whispered to them. "I'm so sorry." The ropes fell away. Lucy rubbed her wrists, red marks showing where the rope had been. Max pulled the tape from his mouth with a gasp. "Daddy." They both cried at the same time. Mr. Hayes rushed forward and pulled them into his arms. He held them so tight, afraid that if he let go, this moment would disappear like smoke. Lucy sobbed into his shoulder. Max clung to his neck. "It's okay," Mr. Hayes said, kissing their heads over and over. "You're safe now. You're safe." Elena stood back, watching. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She just stood there, looking lost and small and broken. "I became the monster," she said quietly. "I wanted to hurt you so badly that I became just like you. I put innocent children in danger. I did exactly what you did." Mr. Hayes looked at her over his children's heads. "No," he said firmly. "You stopped. You chose differently. That's what matters." Before Elena could respond, red and blue lights flashed through the window. Sirens wailed, getting closer and closer. Elena's eyes went wide. "The police." "I called them," a small voice said. Everyone turned. Max held up a small phone, Elena's phone, which must have fallen from her pocket. "When she went to look out the window," Max explained, his voice shaky but brave, "I saw it on the floor. I pressed the emergency button with my foot." Mr. Hayes felt pride and fear crash together in his chest. His clever, brave boy. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. The door burst open, and police officers rushed in, their hands on their guns. "Everyone freeze," the first officer shouted. "Wait." Mr. Hayes stood up, putting himself between Elena and the police. "Wait, please. Let me explain." The officer in charge, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, looked around the room. She saw the ropes on the floor. The frightened children. "Elena der Steinet Fadje. Someone want to tell me what's going on here?" she demanded. Mr. Hayes took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. "My name is Robert Hayes," he said. 5 years ago, 17 people died in a fire at one of my factories. It was my fault. I ignored safety warnings. I locked the exits. I cared more about money than people's lives." The room was silent. Even the officers looked shocked. "This woman," he continued, pointing to Elena, "her brother died in that fire. His name was Daniel. She took my children tonight because she wanted me to feel the pain I caused her, and she was right to want that. I deserved it." "Mr. Hayes, you don't have to," Elena started, but he held up his hand. "Yes, I do," he said. "I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending. Officer, I want to make a full confession. I want to reopen the investigation into that fire, and I want to face justice for what I did." The officer looked at Elena. "Is this true? Did you tie up these children?" Elena nodded slowly. "Yes, but I let them go. I realized that revenge doesn't heal anything. It just spreads more pain. I'm not pressing charges," Mr. Hayes said quickly. "Against her, I mean. Please. She suffered enough. This is between me and the law." The officer shook her head. "That's not how this works, Mr. Hayes. We have to investigate everything that happened here tonight." She turned to Elena. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us." Elena nodded. She looked at Mr. Hayes one last time. "Thank you," she whispered, "for finally telling the truth." As the police led Elena away, Mr. Hayes held his children close. They watched through the window as she was put in the police car, the red and blue lights painting the rain-soaked driveway. "Daddy," Lucy asked in a small voice, "what's going to happen now?" Mr. Hayes knelt down, so he was eye level with them both. "Daddy made some very bad mistakes a long time ago," he said honestly, "and now I have to fix them. It might be hard. It might take a long time. But I promise you I'm going to make things right. Will you go to jail?" Max asked, his lip trembling. "Maybe," Mr. Hayes said. "I don't know. But whatever happens, I love you both more than anything in the world, and I'm going to be a better father, a better person." The next few months were the hardest of Mr. Hayes' life. He hired the best lawyers, not to hide from what he'd done, but to help him tell the truth properly. He reopened the investigation into factory fire himself, handing over all the documents he'd hidden away. The newspapers ran the story for weeks. "Billionaire confesses to deadly cover-up," the headline screamed. People who had once respected him now whispered and pointed. His business partners left. His fancy friends stopped calling. But something strange happened. As he lost all the fake things in his life, he found the real things. He spent every evening with Lucy and Max, actually talking to them, actually listening. He learned that Lucy wanted to be a veterinarian and that Max loved building things with blocks. He'd never known these simple, beautiful things about his own children. Elena was given a lighter sentence because she let the children go and because everyone understood her pain. Mr. Hayes visited her in jail every week. At first, she wouldn't see him, but eventually she agreed. They talked, really talked, about Daniel, about regret, about how hard it is to forgive, and how much harder it is to forgive yourself. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Mr. Hayes told her during one visit, "but I want you to know I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to honor Daniel's memory." "How?" Elena asked. "I'm starting a foundation," he said, "the Daniel Martinez Foundation. It will help families who've lost loved ones in workplace accidents. It will pay for safety improvements in factories. It will make sure no one else has to suffer the way you did, the way those 17 families did." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You're naming it after Daniel?" "If that's okay with you," Mr. Hayes said softly, "I want the world to remember him, not as a victim, but as someone whose life mattered, someone who had dreams and loved his sister and should have lived to see the ocean." Elena covered her face with her hands and cried. Not angry tears this time, healing tears. When she was released 6 months later, Mr. Hayes offered her a job, not as a nanny, but as the director of the Daniel Martinez Foundation. "I can't think of anyone better to lead it," he said. "You know why this matters. You know what's at stake. And you have the strength to make sure it actually helps people, not just makes me look good." Elena hesitated. Could she really work with the man who'd caused her so much pain? But then she thought about Daniel. What would he want? Would he want her to spend her life stuck in hatred? Or would he want her to turn this tragedy into something good? "Okay," she said finally, "but I'm doing this for Daniel. And for all the other Daniels out there who deserve better. That's all I ask," Mr. Hayes said. 2 years later, on a warm summer day, Mr. Hayes, Lucy, Max, and Elena stood on a beach watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. "Uncle Daniel would have loved this," Elena said softly, using the name the twins now called him. "Tell us another story about him," Lucy said, taking Elena's hand. As Elena told him about Daniel's terrible guitar playing and his awful jokes, Mr. Hayes looked out at the endless ocean. He thought about second chances, about how the hardest thing in the world is admitting you were wrong, about how money can buy almost anything except the things that really matter. His mansion was smaller now. Most of his fortune went to the foundation and to the families of the 17 victims. But his house was fuller than it had ever been, full of laughter and truth and love. The Daniel Martinez Foundation had helped hundreds of families. Every factory it inspected became safer. Every life it touched was a small piece of redemption, a small way of saying, Daniel mattered. They all mattered. It would never be enough. Mr. Hayes knew that. No amount of good deeds could bring back the people who died, but he could make sure their deaths weren't meaningless. He could make sure the future was better than the past. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elena smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you," she said to Mr. Hayes, "for choosing the hard path, for telling the truth." "Thank you," he replied, "for teaching me that it's never too late to become the person you should have been all along." The waves crashed on the shore, washing away footprints in the sand. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new chances to choose right over easy. But tonight, on this beach, for people who've been broken by tragedy stood together, healing. Because that's what forgiveness is. Not forgetting, not pretending it didn't happen, but choosing to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. Choosing to let the truth set you free. If this story touched your heart, taught you something about courage and forgiveness, or made you think differently about the choices we make, please like this story and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more powerful tales that remind us that it's never too late to choose the right path. Because every story shared is a chance to spread hope, truth, and the belief that people can change. What did you think? Should Mr. Hayes have faced a harsher punishment? Could you forgive someone like Elena forgave? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.